The Road Darkens, an expansion, a saga expansion for Lord of the Rings, the card game. This is the second expansion in the saga line. These expansions do not depict events that take place around the world of the Lord of the Rings or around the main plot of the Lord of the Rings, like other expansions do. These expansions, the saga ones, tell you the story of the Lord of the Rings. They cover the main plot of the book. The first expansion, the Black Riders, which I covered in a previous video, retells you the story of the first half of the first book, with the company, the fellowship forming, with our hobbits and their friends running around, followed by the Black Riders of the title. The Road Darkens covers the second half of the book, which frankly is also to me possibly the best part of the entire Lord of the Rings. So I was super excited about this expansion. It covers some of the most iconic, some of the most powerful, phenomenal events, including, yes, down in Moira, the duel between Gandalf and the Balrog, which is in fact an event that may occur in this expansion. For this only, I can tell you already, it's a great expansion because it has a quite difficult task, which is to capture such iconic, powerful moments in the book, and I can tell you already, I think it does that well. Now, let's talk about the characters and the challenges that you find in this expansion. Who's there? Cameo. Did you see that? Too late if you didn't. Like in other saga expansions, we're covering the story of the Lord of the Rings, so we need a ring bearer. We find a card, which is different from the previous one, a card with Frodo, and Frodo here has the ability of exhausting the one ring, which is attached to him, and if that card leaves game, understandably enough, leaves the game, you lose the game. And the ring bearer can exhaust it and can avoid an attack, can avoid damage from an attack, but everybody has to raise their threat by 2. So pretty powerful ability, but you need to use it carefully. Also, as you can see, like in the previous saga expansion, the ring bearer has a new sphere of influence, the ringness, I don't remember how it's called. It allows you to purchase either neutral cards or to purchase specific cards of that sphere of influence, and this is the card that you find, there's a few copies, in this expansion, which is a really powerful card because each hero gets +1 wisdom, which is super powerful when you're questing, but it leaves play. It is discarded after a card is destroyed, which is a fairly frequent occurrence in the game. Still, pretty neat. But let us be abundantly clear. The superstar in this game, in this expansion, is not Frodo, is the old man, is Gandalf. Finally, Gandalf, not like in the core set represented by a card that only makes him a cameo. He goes in, does amazing stuff, and then has to leave the game because of the text on its card that forces you to discard at the end of a round. Gandalf now is here to stay. Finally, Gandalf represented by a card that you can use as a hero in the story. Very expensive one, mind you, so you may want to pair him with weaker characters. Hobbits are a good choice. Excellent stats, very good number of hit points. But look at the text, and you can see, where is the sphere of influence? Well, he's a jack of all trades. When you have Gandalf, you play with the top card of your deck face up, which is really good. You have some knowledge of what's coming next. Once per phase, not even once per turn, you may play the top card of your deck as if it was in your hand. When playing a card this way, Gandalf is considered to have the printed such and such and such icons, so he can have a lot of icons. This is a great ability. Of course, you will want to spend some time creating a deck just for him, which can be you add him to a deck with, 1 or 2 sphere of influences, in which you also seed a bunch of cards which have maybe value of 0 or 1, and they come from other spheres of influence. And when they come up, boom, you can use them. So maybe you have a deck which is, say, red and purple mainly, and then you also have some blue and green effects, which is the only one that can really trigger, but he can do that. And if they're low cost or no cost, then he meets the requirement of cards that are at no cost, but you still need to have somebody with that sphere of influence. he can simply create a lot of effects. He can make your deck very eclectic. And he also comes with cards that are specifically for him, named for him, or that are of his group that he's starting. One such card is Gandalf Staff. Yes, it has to go to Gandalf only, but it's super powerful. You exhaust Gandalf Staff to do one of the following. Draw a card, add a resource to a hero's resource pool, or discard a shadow card from a non-unique enemy. Really neat. Another card, which is the Wizard Pipe. You attach it to any strike archer, and you exhaust the Wizard Pipe to exchange a card in your hand with the top card of your deck. Remember that he can see at all times the card on the deck, can use them, so this gives a lot of flexibility. Maybe the time that an interesting card was there, you didn't have the resources, the card went into your hand, then you put it back in there, and boom. Again, he can activate cards from all sorts of spheres. Incredible eclectic ability. And then this is just a very powerful spell that makes him a force to reckon with. You add the Flame of Anor to the victory display and discard the top card of your deck to read any strike card you control. So you can cast this after he has done other stuff. After Gandalf has done other stuff, the card gets plus X attack until the end of the phase, where X is the discarded card's cost. And remember, you know what that card is, so that's pretty good because you can set that up. You can put a powerful card there, then you use the spell, and boom, and the three Gandalf-y cards work together and create a very powerful overall effect, very powerful synergy. I love this character. I found it hard to play without him since I cracked these expansion open. It's great for this theme, for the specific events represented here. Of course, you just need him for the game to feel like it is portraying these events, but in general, there's a character that we'll use a lot because it's powerful, but also a lot of fun to play because of the huge variety of events, huge variety of effects that he can create. Other interesting allies that come in this expansion, we have Galadriel and Elrond that have something in common. They're expensive, they're powerful, and they are not there to stay. They are pretty much the cameo heroes that Gandalf was in the original set. Galadriel needs to be discarded at the end of the round, but as you can see the text, you can search a card, you can search the top of your deck, and then boom, put a card in play, an attachment will cost 3 or less, and that's pretty good. And she herself, for the round when she's out, can give you considerable help in a quest. Elrond has excellent stats too, but again, he just comes around, does his things, and says bye, and he's back home for dinner. Needs to be discarded at the end of the round in gameplay terms. But after you enter play, then you can choose to heal damage from a hero, discard a condition, or everybody draws a card. So it has this healing power. Boromir, powerful warrior, nice stats, especially when we look at the attack stats, but he also gets some extra defense while defending against an enemy with engagement cost higher than your threat. Basically, when you engage somebody voluntarily, when you look for trouble, oh, he is in the first line, he needs to be there. Also, after he takes any amount of damage, you ready him, which is particularly good because of the timing of game effects. It's good to be able to ready him in the middle of combat, pretty much. These are some of the most interesting cards that you find in this expansion, meaning talking about the cards that go in your decks and you can use to customize your decks. But Gandalf, oh my gosh, such a good card. Now, for the story, for the scenarios, you get 3 scenarios. The first one is called the Ring Goes South. I'm not going to tell you too much. I don't want to spoil it too much, but I'll give you a sense of what happens. Also, because you may have heard of this book. It's called The Lord of the Rings. So if you read it, you kind of already get a sense of what the story is about at this point, what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do is going to tell you the main events, but trying to give you a sense of how they work in terms of gameplay. So minor spoilers, if you haven't read The Lord of the Rings, you may be surprised, but I assume that you have. Council of Elrond, things start easy in this scenario because people are there talking with Elrond, making decisions and gaining resources. Don't worry, things will go bad, will go south, pun kind of intended, very soon. As you start traveling south, and then you have to deal with enemies, and in particular with wargs that follow you. As you remember from the book, you're also trying to climb a mountain. Things don't go very well, so in the end, you need to find a way to reach Moria, and you need to enter there. So this scenario ends at the gates of Moria. Now, you remember what happens there, that there is a big monster that does that big thing? Well, that's something you will have to worry about. But what I really like is that the scenario has a very interesting flow, because the stages play differently, from the calm beginning to bad stuff that starts happening, fights with wild animals, to at the end a confrontation with the final boss at the gates of Moria. And it really works very well in creating a sense of doom, of foreboding, that's just the beginning of the bad stuff. The next scenario, which picks up the story from where the scenario ends, is the best one in the set, is probably my favorite one in the game, and I played quite a few of them, but it may just be because I love the original episode so much. I like the section of Moria so much. I love the duel between Gandalf and the Balrog is something that when I read it the first time, when I was like maybe 12, I had dreams about that. That's how vivid the story, the scene was in my mind. So I may be slightly biased. But there's a great scenario because it gives me something of that flavor. It gives me that sense of like doom, that sense of like despair, of being lost at the core of the earth, with horrendous monsters pushing you from all directions. And you know that there is that sense of like bad stuff is coming, because at setup, so not too big of a spoiler here, there's this card that is placed in play. You put damage tokens on them, and there are various events that will remove them, and when it goes down to 0, the card doesn't have any damage token on it, doom, then the Balrog arrives. And there are no damage tokens, add the Balrog to the staging area. Also, the Balrog is not just going to sit there and do nothing, it will do bad stuff. Here's the Balrog. I owe it to you to show you a list, the image, without giving you spoilers about the stats and the terrifying stuff that this monster can do. But yes, you need to face the Balrog at some point. If you're lucky, you'll get to the Balrog. Maybe you'll be slaughtered somewhere in the mazes, in the dungeons of Moria before you even get there. Because before you get there, you had to explore, and you had this sense of being hunted. This is really fun. It's not a dungeon crawler where you're just there collecting treasures, going at your own pace. You had the sense that you're hunted, that these tunnels are crawling with all sorts of monsters, and you need to move fast to leave your purses behind. You need to move fast so you can run towards your meeting with the Balrog. I mean, that's being worse than between a rock and a hard place, is between a Balrog and an army of orcs and other nasty enemies. And the scenario culminates, peaks at the bridge of Khazad-dûm with the, you guessed it, the Great Duel. It's a fantastic scenario. It's hard to beat, it's challenging gameplay-wise, but in terms of atmosphere, it's simply second to none. It's just so thematic, so immersive, so powerful. Definitely my favorite scenario of this expansion, and one of my favorite ones in the game. Just because it comes after this one seems a little less exciting, but in truth, it has all sorts of reasons for interest. The breaking of the Fellowship. Our heroes survived their ordeal down there in Moria, but bad stuff is happening. And in a sense, it has similarities in structure with this one, with the first one, in the sense that it also starts easy, sorta. The characters are traveling on the Great River, and not all areas are equally easy to navigate. Sometimes your characters will take damage, but it's basically travel oriented, because your enemies are following you, are gathering on the sides of the river and not attacking you yet. As you progress in the story, the enemies attack, they create chaos. There is in fact complete like anarchy and chaos when the main attack starts, and that generates the breaking of the fellowship. The groups of heroes that are controlled by various players are going to split. So actually, once you move to the second stage and you're fighting that, and it becomes from travel oriented, it becomes combat oriented. From that point on, actually, the next stage, each player has to resolve it individually. There are 4 different quest cards, as you can see, all 3A. Each player takes one, and each player has to work on it independently. So you really get this sense of this battle that has started as like messy, that you have like clouds of dust and it's hard to see ahead of you. The idea of dust doesn't really fit with the theme, but it's really the sense of like limited visibility or limited understanding of what's happening. Small groups of people moving around in the chaos and trying to do different things. As you can see from the titles of the 4 3A scenarios that each player has to resolve, each player has to take one. It is about doing different things with different circumstances and with different conditions. Huge replay value, even if you're playing by yourself, then the various combinations, of course, will keep the game fresh and will present different sets of challenges each time. You keep moving in this chaos here, in this chaotic landscape, until an event happens, until Frodo makes his choice. Not too many details, so not too many spoilers. And at that point, the Ring Bearer sets out, and the scenario moves towards its final chapter. Not gonna tell you much about it, but you can imagine what happens there. 3 excellent scenarios. My favorite, second favorite, pretty favorite too. They're just very strong scenarios with very strong characters. Look, I like the first expansion in the Saga line, the Black Riders. Also, it was the first expansion of this type that I played. But this one is incredibly superior to that one. It's just stronger than that one from any point of view. Maybe with the exception of the art. The art is equally excellent in both expansions, but we have come to expect that from Fantasy Flight. They don't do like screen capture. They produce really beautiful art. And this expansion is really strong. The story is strong, the characters are powerful, interesting, they give you so many possibilities for customization, for creating your own powerful decks. The scenarios are challenging and they're just exploding with theme, exploding with story. And people that play Lord of the Rings, the card game, they are drawn to that. I mean, every time that I talk about the game with somebody, the reason that they like it is the game has a strong theme, has a strong story. It's mechanically very sound, but people don't play this as a Euro with some art on it. They play it because there has been a lot of work that has been done in this game to tailor the mechanics to the theme, and it has been done well enough, successfully enough, that indeed you do have a strong sense of story when you play the game. You play mechanically and a story emerges from it. It just so happens that the story that is the topic of this expansion, the immersion of this expansion, is one of the greatest fantasy stories ever told, if not one of the greatest stories ever told. It is the high point of the book, at least for me. And so for me, playing this game, this expansion in particular, was a joy, really intense joy. I enjoyed every moment, and I can only recommend this expansion to anybody who loves the Lord of the Rings, the book and or the card game. It's just a phenomenal expansion, incredibly fun. I cannot recommend it highly enough. The Road Darkens, second expansion in the Saga line for Lord of the Rings, the card game.